Your past is not a prison, it's a classroom. Welcome to the Living Inside Out podcast. I'm your host, Toks Aruture, entrepreneur with 20 years of experience, founder of The Baby Cut Shop, a luxury nursery furniture brand and design studio in Chelsea, London. I also founded The Revealry, an invitation-only exclusive furniture company. I'm a TEDx speaker and a mindset coach. This podcast is about embracing mindset shifts through life, business, and faith. Each week, we dive beneath the surface to uncover and challenge the limiting beliefs that hold us back, exploring how to live from the inside out. I believe God has equipped us with the resources to live the life we truly desire. So, if you're ready to use your natural gifts and step into your best self, let's get started. Welcome to episode 114. I am chuffed that you have joined me and I thank you. Especially if this is your first time listening, welcome to the family. I'd love to know where you heard about Living Inside Out from. I don't take it lightly that you've taken out 25 minutes or so to hear this voice. And I'd love to know where you heard about the podcast or where you heard about me from. Was it social media? Was this forwarded to you by a friend? Did you stumble upon it? How did you hear about it? Because it helps me know where to direct my efforts and just really to connect better as well with my listeners. And if this is your 60th time or your 7th time, or maybe even your 114th time, thank you for coming back, for subscribing, for listening. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do. If you haven't rated it, please do. If you haven't left a comment, some podcast platforms like Spotify allow you to leave a comment on each episode. Apple, I believe, just lets you rate it once, which is like, why? I think I might be wrong. I need to check that out. But I would really appreciate a 5-star rating, and I'd appreciate you subscribing, and I'd appreciate you also sharing it with your network, particularly with people who you think will find it useful. But I've been busy. What have you been up to? I went and launched a new podcast. Would you believe it? This week, actually, it was a bit impromptu. So I often record voice notes of bursts of inspiration that I receive. Sometimes it could be a realization of a deep truth. It could be a revelation. It could be an understanding of something that I have been banging my head against the wall about. But either way, I get these bursts of inspiration that I can't keep to myself, and I cannot wait to put it on a whole podcast. So I do a voice note and send it to anyone I think will benefit from it, mostly friends or colleagues at work. Or it could be that I put it in my WhatsApp groups. I have a couple of groups, and almost every single time, the feedback is always, what you just said to me is exactly what I needed to hear, which is why I obey that yearning to record and send it. So this week it landed, it was last week, landed in the ears of radio producer, and her response was, can you please record this for me every week so I can include it as part of my segment? And I said, sure thing. It would be exciting. It would be nice to have more people hear these wonderful bursts of inspiration. Then I was speaking to Adirayo, who's my manager, and she said, we need to turn this into a podcast. Why don't we put it on the podcast, save it somewhere so it's not just disappearing on live radio, which made perfect sense. And the Authentic Edge was born. So Authentic Edge was released this week. What's today? Today's Saturday. So the Authentic Edge was released on Wednesday, just a few days ago, and I'm so excited. But then I thought, A weekly podcast of just 3 minutes or 4 minutes of content is not really going to do much. Why don't we make it a daily one? Because if you know me personally or you have hung around me, you know that I can talk. Well, if you listen to this podcast, you know that I can talk. But it's not just that I can talk, but I have a lot of content, a lot of information and wisdom that God has given to me, that some of it is going in the book, some of it is stored on my Evernote. I have thousands of notes on Evernote, and I'm like, God, what do I do with this? And I know that the time will come, and medium in which I'm meant to share it, He will reveal it to me. But I thought, why not? So you have another podcast to subscribe to and to convert into a daily habit, this time, not weekly. It's called The Authentic Edge, and you get short bursts of inspiration or motivation to start your day. I'm a big believer, just like you are, that the information you receive on your inside determines how your outside is going to look. I'm a big believer too, like you, that we need to feed our minds healthy material. And one way that I do so is by ensuring that the first bit of information I get in when I wake up in the morning is not social media. It is not anything that's not the Word of God for me. And so this is a great way to start your day. It's a great habit to pick up because it gives you enough to ponder on for the rest of the day. And a lot of what I share is what will be beneficial for anyone, regardless of your faith, regardless of your creed, regardless of your race. So I invite you to subscribe to The Authentic Edge. It's a nice, quick listen, and I've left the link in the show notes, but if you search for it, you'll find it. I never delete my contacts, or should I say, I rarely delete my contacts. When I came back from the United States and began to build my business and my life, I saved every single contact in my phone book. Part of it must have been because I had a mindset of holding on. I was so scared of losing anything that I held on to everything I had, including contacts. And it's a habit I still have, and a habit I am trying to break. Not because it's bad to hold on to contacts, but it's the motivation behind it. Why am I doing so? And in my case, if I'm doing it out of a fear of losing anything or out of a habit of holding on or hoarding, then it's bad for me. So I'm not saying that it's bad to save your contacts. However, I even have the contacts of people who have scammed me. Let me just tell you just how much I hold on to contacts, but that's for a different reason. I do so, and I put their name scammer next to, I put the word scammer next to it, just in case I delete them and somehow they filter back into my life. Especially being in business, you get recommendations, tradesmen, like everything from delivery people to suppliers. And if I've had a bad experience with one of them, I make sure I note it and I save it so that I don't get bitten twice. So recently I came across an old supplier, one of my very first UK suppliers from 16 years ago, on Facebook, because Facebook suggests your contacts, you see. I stared at her photo and remembered what it was like in those days when I was starting to build my business. I realized that I had exalted her and many others higher because I worshipped the solution to my problems, and they had the solution to my problems. So let me explain. I believe that one of the most limiting behaviors we can do is when we are going through a challenge, or when we have a desire, a strong need or a strong desire for something, is to worship the thing that we want, or we worship the answer to what we want. Of course, it's not done consciously, but when it becomes an obsession, when it floods your mind and it takes up all the space in your mind, and you look at it and you stare at it, that's worship. And so I realized that back then, I would look at people like her, and I don't know why this particular woman stood out. I think it was because she had her own line of bed linen and she had an e-commerce store. And I admire the fact that her linens were very simple and she only had one design. She had one design of bedding and had them in two different colors, blue and pink. And it just looks so beautiful, so nostalgic, so different. There are a number of reasons. The fact that she was also an artist and she designed it herself, I had a longing to be able to do that. And I would look at her and I would look at her business. And of course, because of my super active imagination, I would imagine that her life was perfect and her life was everything I wanted my life to be. Very weird, I know, but that's how my mind functions. So I had exalted her and many others because I worshipped what they had. And I thought if I had what they have, I would be fine. So in my case, I had lost everything, and anybody who could have their own brand, run their own business, sell to different retailers, and also have access direct to consumers. So they did B2B, they did D2C. To me, that was a symbol of comfort and normalcy and wealth. It was a symbol of all the things I wanted. So in today's episode, I want to share 3 ways in which your past can hold you back and how to unburden and unshackle yourself from it. The first one is a lesson that the Lord taught me, and that is, don't string all your past experiences together. This was a powerful lesson because I realized that I was taking all of my past challenges and failures and I was using it to form a garland, you know. I would say, oh, first the recession hit and the shops around us closed, and then after that, we lost everything, and then we had to come back, and I was also pregnant with our 4th son. Then we didn't have a place to stay, and da 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 da. And what I was doing was creating a rope, weaving together a rope the way that you know, just what comes to mind is for us Black girls when we're having our hair done and you're feeding the hair to the hairdresser and she's adding bits and bits of extensions as she goes along. That's exactly what I was doing with my bad experiences or my challenging experiences. It's natural to want to put a finger on the cause of our pain. So when someone asks you what the matter is, you begin the story from 1999 and you see this isn't merely telling a story for clarity. This is you reiterating to yourself just how deep you are in trouble. The longer the story, the deeper the hole. But how about instead of seeing it as a rope tying you to your past, because that's what it is. It's a rope that you're building. Look at each event as a moment when you found the strength to keep going, or a lesson. I call challenges lessons. Instead of it being a tether that holds you down, know that these experiences serve as a stepping stone and they remind you how far you've come. And a perfect example of that is my TED Talk, where I do list all of the experiences I had, one thing leading to the other, but I also pull out the lessons that each one gave me. I guarantee you that you can look at your life and look at every event that today it might be a source of embarrassment or shame or regret to you, and you can change the meaning today. Change the meaning of each one so that instead of it being a bunting that has, you know, one black triangle after the other, or a bead, if you think about a necklace with beads on it and you have, you know, each black bead represents a dark moment in your life. Change them into colorful beads interspersed with the black ones. You know, it wasn't all bad. And today you are still writing your story. Today you're still weaving a rope anyway. We're always writing a story for as long as we're alive. And if you can begin to pull out, let that be a habit, pull out the positives, you know, in your life, then it makes looking back a lot more pleasant and less triggering. The second point is one that I have shared in past episodes on my courses, or if you've ever done Get Unstuck or you joined the Blueprint workshop with me recently, is knowing that there are two schools of thought in the Bible, block logic and Greek logic. So block logic is how God spoke to his children, which means that random occurrences or seemingly random and unrelated occurrences were happening, and God would now pull them all together and they would form a beautiful picture. And Greek logic is what the intellectuals use, which is how the world functions today. It means that A must lead to B and B must lead to C. Things always have to make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, we stand on that spot and we make it make sense. That's how we work today. That's how we think in the world today. But the issue with that is that it creates an expectation that's not necessarily true. Because now your expectation for tomorrow is based on an existing trajectory defined by the past. So when I lost everything, I had a visual of one thing leading to the other, and I developed an expectation that things were not going to work out, or that things were going to get increasingly harder. And it was based on my interpretation at the time of what was going on. So first it's the fear of losing everything. And then you start to lose a little bit and you think, okay, I've lost a lot. It's not going to get worse. Then it gets worse. I'm like, okay, fine. It's gotten worse. Then you have to move back to England. Okay. Now I've lost my home and my cars and everything. And I'm also pregnant as well. And now I don't have anywhere to put my family. And, it was one thing after the other, but what was happening as well was my expectation was for things to keep getting worse, because Greek logic works on a natural progression of things. But if you are a believer, if you're a Christian, or you have a faith, you believe in God, then you know that random occurrences can happen and things don't necessarily have to make sense for it to work out for you. So I want to encourage you to ditch Greek logic and embrace block logic. And the third way your past can hold you back is when you allow it to become your identity. So for example, we live in a society that uses labels like, he's a rich man, she's a poor woman, he's very smart, she's very wise. I'm not saying labels are bad, but a label is man-made and it's based on external features, not internal. So if you allow yourself to be labeled either by yourself or by other people, you become trapped and you begin to operate and function within the confines of that label. Labels have their place. You need to know that you are dealing with a real doctor that went to medical school and not a quack that woke up and decided to stick that on his name. But even with the labels that you have earned, whether it's a PhD or you're a manager or CEO or some sort of executive, regardless of what you are, I want you to have a consciousness that you are not trapped by the label, that is not the extent to who you are, that who you are is a lot more than what the label says you are. And the label is not your identity. So a way around that is to ask yourself, what meaning are you giving this? So in the case of looking at my old contact, my former supplier, I went back in time and I decided to expose the meaning I was giving my situation all the way back then. And here's what I discovered. I had named my situation desperate. I named it lack and loss. And, all of the negative emotions that I was feeling became a label and a title for what I was going through. Well, guess what I see when I look back with my 2020 vision? I see that I was being prepared. So there's a label of preparation, the introduction to God's faithfulness. I see the labels of strength and resilience and growth. I see an introduction to myself. I see that I was preparing for this moment and my absolutely beautiful future. So now I can thank God without reservation for my past experiences. It doesn't mean that I should pretend that it was pleasant when it wasn't. It was hard. It was challenging. I cried. It was what it was. But we shouldn't only give meaning to things that were pleasant. Every experience in your life deserves validation. So I want you to look back and think about the times in your life that are still troubling you today. If you look in the past, are there moments that you still cringe and you still, have a sense of regret or shame about? Well, we need to change the meaning that we're giving it. I want you to look back at that moment or those moments one at a time and give them a different name, because who you are today would not be possible without you having that past experience. So if anything, you owe your past thanks. Here's a recap. Don't string your past experiences together, especially if they're negative. Know that each experience is separate and unrelated. One thing doesn't necessarily have to lead to the other. So that means you're adopting block logic. And the third is, don't allow your past to become your identity, and don't allow anything really to become a label. Remember that you are more than a label. Even if your label is huge, you are more than that. If you were the president of the United States, I would tell you that you are more than your label. Okay? I hope all of this resonates with you. I would like to know more about you and your thoughts about this episode, and you can let me know either by leaving a comment on your platform, if your platform allows it, or sending me an email, talks@talksarotary.com, or let's connect on social media. I'm active on Instagram, active on Facebook, and on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to get into Threads. Are you on Threads? Let me know. Don't forget to subscribe also to The Authentic Edge so you can get those early morning sound bites every weekday. Thank you for listening. Remember to live from the inside out.